Can body language really give police consent to search you? Normally, the police have two methods to search you or your property: obtain a search warrant or your permission. Even if you don't verbally consent to a search, the police are allowed to interpret your body language to believe you do consent to a search. I'll explain how that's legal here in a minute, but I have said this over and over and over again that it is critical that you are clear with the police officer that you do not consent to the search. You must expressly state to the police officer, "I do not consent to a search to my person, my place, or my property." Otherwise, the police have a tendency to believe that your body language or your lack of a response led them to reasonably believe you gave them consent to search. So how are police able to do this? In United States versus Sanchez and United States versus Ramirez-Chilel, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals has repeatedly made it clear that consent can be nonverbal. For example, if a homeowner doesn't initially respond to an officer when asked for consent to search, but instead steps aside and yields the right of way to the officer at the front door, the officer is allowed to reasonably infer he has been given consent to search. I mean, look, this sounds logical on its face. The problem is many people get extremely nervous and very afraid when they start talking to the police. Let me ask you this. Are you one of those people that ever shifts your weight from one foot to the other when someone's asking you a question? Or maybe you look away for a second as you're trying to think about what you want to say when someone asks you a question. This is exactly what happened in United States versus Crispin. The police officer asked Mr. Crispin for consent to frisk him. In response, Mr. Crispin turned around, placed his hand on the police cruiser. The court decided that Mr. Crispin's action of turning around and putting his hand on the police cruiser was sufficient to infer that he had given consent to the officer to search him. While body camera footage might help in a situation like this, what if it turns out that the actual body camera wasn't working or turned on at the time? The case of United States versus Pinheiro established that the police do not need a working body camera or written consent in order to establish legal consent to search. Think about that for a second. An inoperable camera, either because it really wasn't working or because the police chose not to turn it on, will not stop the court from siding with the police. This also means that the police can choose to interpret any body movement or body language in any way they want to. Remember, in court, it always comes down to your word versus the cop's words. And unless you have witnesses available to testify, the police officers are always going to interpret whatever they see or hear in light most favorable to their investigation. But is it really possible that the police are allowed to read your nonverbal cues just as importantly as the words coming out of your mouth? The FBI thinks so. According to the FBI, they are looking for what they call behavioral anomalies. I'm going to read to you what they say. Behavioral anomalies are verbal and nonverbal signs of cognitions and emotions that provide additional clues to what an individual is thinking and feeling beyond the content of the words being spoken. In the context of investigative interviewing, these behavioral anomalies are called indicators. In short, the FBI and other law enforcement are looking for any of these anomalies so that they can conclude you are lying. In fact, back in 2009, there was a crime drama on Fox called Lie to Me, which was based on the field of microfacial indicators. Here's the problem. You may be innocent and completely telling the truth, but now here's a cop interpreting your body language as you being guilty. The FBI claims they can do this scientifically by looking for validated versus non-validated indicators. For example, they claim that the flash of the eyes so that the white above the iris is visible is a clear indicator that you are concealing fear. But when someone looks up and to the left with the twitch of the left eyebrow, the FBI claims that's just an old myth. The problem is there's a ton of false clues. At least 3 peer-reviewed articles in Science magazine have rejected the use of eye behavior as a basis of determining deception. But even if the FBI does know what they're talking about, you never want to trust the cop standing in front of you to interpret your body language correctly. The sad truth is the police do rely on these false clues as a basis to conclude deception, which leads to inaccurate readings of suspects, informants, and witnesses. In other words, Cops will claim you are lying on your nonverbal clues even when you were telling the truth. So to defend yourself, you must expressly state, "I do not consent to a search of my person, my place, or my property." This will then force the police to establish some type of probable cause in order to legally search you, or if they make it up, you'll end up winning in court anyway. And you know what excuse cops love to use these days? They love to claim that they smell weed coming from your car, and body camera footage won't help you there. So check out this next video to know what to do to defend yourself if the cops use that excuse against you. I'll see you over there.